Hello, I'm Ted Morrissey, and this is a video for my Revisionist Shakespeare class. In fact, the final video of this session. As you know, we have just read Margaret Atwood's Hagseed. Generally pretty well received across the board. I know one or two folks had a issue or two here and there, but by and large, people were very impressed and pleased with reading Hagseed and its retelling of The Tempest. We had a lively chat about that on the discussion board, and then I posted some stuff in terms of the notes about the book, including a video with Margaret Atwood herself where she talks about writing the novel. So I have little else to add to all of that. I too really enjoyed the book, but as you know, I'm a meta guy. I like the metafictive sort of approach, and this version of The Tempest is definitely metafictional, and so I really appreciated that in particular. So I just wanted to kind of close with a few, I guess, general kind of comments, and then just kind of leave it at that. So, as you know, we've been reading these books that have been published by the Hogarth Shakespeare Press. We started with reading Othello, and then followed it up with Tracy Chevalier's New Boy, and then we read The Winter's Tale, and followed that up with Jeanette Winterson's The Gap of Time, and then, of course, as I mentioned, The Tempest and Hagseed by Margaret Atwood. There are other books out there in that same vein. In an earlier incarnation of this class, when the sessions were longer, I also included the reading of The Taming of the Shrew, which you know what I'm going to say. I love The Taming of the Shrew. And then we would follow it up by reading Anne Tyler's Vinegar Girl. And, when I had to cut some of the material when we went to shorter sessions, I don't know, I guess it's been a couple of years ago now, it was a tough decision in terms of what to cut, because I really love, like I said, the Taming of the Shrew. But when it came down to it, I wasn't as fond of this novel as some of the others. It's much lighter. It's more of a kind of a romantic comedy, which, of course, The Taming of the Shrew is of that vein too. So it's certainly Anne Tyler was was kind of tapping into that vibe. And don't get me wrong, it's a good novel. I definitely enjoyed reading it. It's an easy read. I'm a really slow reader, but yet I burned through it fairly quickly because it's not super complex. Like I said, it's more of a straightforward, sort of a light-hearted story with some, amusing characters. So I don't know if you're in the mood for something a little lighter after the books we've read this session, but you're still in the Shakespeare revisionist mode, you might want to check out Vinegar Girl. I definitely would recommend doing as we did and reading The Taming of the Shrew first. So the Shakespeare play that I know best of all, and I taught it for 20 plus years, and just feel like I know it backward and forward. When I go to productions of the play, I feel like I could step in at any moment and take one of the parts and do okay. Not probably the lead, that would be difficult, and Lady Macbeth, that'd be tricky too. But anyway, Macbeth is the book that the play that I feel like I really know best. So best of all the plays. So when I was excited when the revisionist book came out from the Hogarth Shakespeare Press, and this is Joe Nesbo's Macbeth, and it is a much longer revisionist work. It's 400 and some pages, I think, something like that, 443. Not really my cup of tea. I mean, it's sort of an action, adventure, detective, thriller kind of thing, which isn't my really my first choice when it comes to reading. So I think this would be it wouldn't really be doable on a couple of different counts because of its length. It'd be hard to read that in a week, after reading Macbeth. And like I said, I don't know from a literary standpoint that it has as much to talk about as some of the other works that we we read this session. But I just wanted to make you aware that it is out there. And if you're a Joe Nesbo fan and like that sort of fiction, you might really enjoy this revisionist version of Macbeth. There is a revision of King Lear out there, which I have not gotten a hold of and read yet. Gillian Flynn, is that how you say her first name? Is working on a revision of Hamlet, which I am looking forward to especially, but that doesn't seem to be published yet. Seems like they kind of slowed down during the pandemic, but didn't we all, right? So they were kind of cranking out these revisionist works pretty steadily, and then they kind of hit the skids here for a while. But hopefully, two or three others will be published in the not too distant future, and so on. So keep your eye out on the web for those books if you enjoyed reading these revisionist tales. Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second because I want to find something. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. I've got this huge stack of books, which I'm going to use for the next video I'm going to make. And I wanted one of the books, and wouldn't you know, it was on the very bottom. I was about to do like this Jenga thing with this stack of books. So I thought, let's just not. Right. But the point I want to make here at the very end, and I've made this a few other times during the session, but in case this is your first encounter with revisionist work, I don't want you to come away with the impression that what we read this session was the only thing that counts as revisionist work. And what I mean by that is taking an entire play, for example, by Shakespeare, and reimagining it in a different context and trying to incorporate basically all of the storyline and all of the elements into this new work. That certainly is a type of revisionist work. There's no doubt about it. But that's not what revisionist work oftentimes is. As I've said, revisionist work can oftentimes be prequels or sequels to some classic text. That's actually the mode I tend to work in most frequently. I've written several revisionist works, and they tend to be either prequels leading up to a well-known storyline, or as I said, a sequel of sorts to the original. So that's fairly common. You can, take a particular character and sort of retell the story from their perspective. It's kind of the original, but from a different character's point of view, and so new information is brought into the narrative, and obviously different conclusions are drawn about character motivation, that kind of thing. So that would be another way to revise a text, perhaps. And then this is one of my favorite revisionist works that I'm about to share with you here. As you probably know, I teach another revisionist fiction class for Lindenwood, which actually I taught one of the first classes I taught, and then later I got this idea for this Shakespeare revisionist course. And maybe some of you have taken that class, but that one's a little truer to sort of what revisionist fiction can be, in that we look at some original texts and then look at various revisions of them that are sometimes prequels, sometimes sequels, sometimes other kinds of things, right? And when I had to cut that course down to a shorter length when we went to different sessions. This combination of books that I lost, which again was very painful, because when I first taught that course, the first 2 or 3 times, if not longer, one of the primary texts that we read, one of the original texts, was The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But in fact, it's supposed to be pronounced Jekyll. It's an old Scottish name, and so when Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the novella, he deliberately was trying to play on the idea of hide and seek, and so he thought Jekyll sounds kind of like seek, so Jekyll and Hyde. And people in Scotland, of course, knew how to pronounce the name because, like I said, it's an old Scottish name. But as soon as it was published in America, we got it wrong and started pronouncing it Jekyll and Hyde, and it just is sort of stuck, at least on this side of the Atlantic, right? But it's supposed to be Jekyll, right? So when you're talking about it, you can show people you're in the know by pronouncing it correctly. But anyway, we would read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is a great novella in and of itself. Very, very short, so very easy to read, but very page turning if you haven't read it. And then the revisionist work that we would read is Valerie Martin's Mary Riley. And I wanted to bring this up in particular because Jekyll and Hyde, the story of Robert Louis Stevenson's story, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, takes place during the book, but it's really in the background. What the book is really about is a young woman who is a maid in in Dr. Jekyll's home, and so she's a witness to this strange stuff going on. But again, it's really in the background. This is really more about her and her life because she has her own trials and tribulations and her own monsters to face. And so there's a lot of really interesting things going on metaphorically between Mary Riley's experiences and what we know to be the experiences of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Again, which are always kind of in the background. It's sort of like a subtext almost to this novel. And if you weren't familiar with the original, even if you weren't familiar with it at all, you could still read Mary Riley and just enjoy the heck out of it, just because it's a great novel, a great story in and of itself. But obviously, if you have some familiarity, or if you have a lot of familiarity, that just keeps adding layers and layers of context to what's going on in this novel. So anyway, I just wanted to recommend that. So I'll just kind of leave on that note, I think. So just so you're aware, there are a lot of ways of doing revisionist fiction, revisionist work. It could be a whole novel. It could be just a short story. That's actually how I started down that path. I wrote a short story, which was a sequel to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And that I really enjoyed that process. So that kind of spurred me to take on longer projects of revisionist work and so forth. I had just discovered recently that Joyce Carol Oates wrote a collection of stories called Marriages and Infidelities, which has several short stories which are revisionist works of classic short stories like James Joyce's of the Dead, um, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw. There's a few others in there which are not coming to me. I haven't read it yet. I've ordered it because I'm really, interested now that I know that to be the case. So anyway, maybe that would be a good way to enter into writing revisionist fiction if you're sort of interested, but the idea of writing a whole novel in a revisionist mode, seems a little overwhelming. Maybe try your hand at a short story, right? A prequel or a sequel or some story where, there's a well-known narrative that's kind of in the background of that book or something like that. All right, so I'm gonna leave it there. I'm anxious to read your final projects. For this video, if maybe you want to make some general comments about revisionist work and whether your attitude about revisionist work has changed over the course of the session, maybe if you have some specific ideas of your own kind of revisionist work, you had just suggested incredibly imaginative and impressive list of possible revisions of these Shakespeare plays throughout the session. So maybe I care to know about, or I definitely would care to know about any one or two or three ideas in particular that now looking back really do hold some interest for you that you think you might like to pursue. All right, so I will stop there. It's been great working with you, and hopefully I will see you down the digital trail.